Welcome to the College of Education 10-Minute Research Break, a podcast devoted to highlighting research by Illinois State University's College of Education, faculty, staff, and students. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and take a break with us.
Hi, I'm Tricia Class. Today I'm talking with Deborah MacPhee, a faculty in the C&I, that is the Curriculum and Instruction Department. She teaches undergraduate literacy methods courses and graduate courses in language and literacy. The article that we will discuss today combines our interest in using literature for teaching in content areas and action for social justice. Welcome, Deborah. Thank you for talking with me.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Your article was a lot of fun to read, and it discusses using literature in the social studies classroom to address equity issues related to how people with disabilities are treated. Could you first summarize the general literature on the use of children's literature in classrooms, but then, too, talk about the limits of most current research in practice addressing this issue?
Certainly. Well, children's literature is widely used in classrooms. We wanted to focus on disabilities literature specifically, and so we looked at the scope of disabilities literature and how it gets used in classrooms. And what we were finding was while the children's literature with characters with disabilities is getting better, it's not as good as it could be and as a lot of people would want it to be. So, for example, there are a lot of pieces of children's literature about disabilities. There are also lots of children's literature that have characters with disabilities, but they're typically secondary characters and not necessarily main characters. So the field wants to move forward in the way of getting more literature out that has main characters that have disabilities and who are living real lives and dealing with real problems and those kinds of things. And so the books that we introduce in this article have main characters with disabilities. In classrooms, we found that there are some studies happening now that look at how teachers are using disabilities to potentially shift children's perceptions or attitudes and actions towards people with disabilities. What we've seen is that just reading the literature doesn't necessarily do that, doesn't have a big effect on changing actual perceptions and attitudes and then actions. And so for our article, we're arguing that it's what you do with the literature, making it part of the curriculum, or being critical and moving toward social action.
You ground your proposed framework to address the limitations of this popular literature right now by combining the concepts related to critical literacy and social justice. Could you outline these two foundations of your study?
Sure. So critical literacy is a stance in which readers are encouraged to question texts and authors. And a foundational understanding of critical literacy is that no text is neutral, that text should be read, if you will, with a critical lens through which we examine issues of equity, also power relations that exist between authors and readers or between characters in the texts. So we believe that through critical literacy, or being critical of the text that we read, we can move toward a more socially just society. So social justice comes into education from the belief that to be educated is to make the world a better place. And so that's kind of where, and we think that critical literacy is how you get there.
And I think the major contribution of this study is your proposed four-part structure that would move instruction from using literature to provide just mere awareness of disabilities and other issues to shifting perceptions and promoting positive actions. Could you describe the key components of your structure in this application?
Sure, yeah. So, and this structure would work with any marginalized group. We just used it here to talk about disabilities. But the first thing that we want to do is to disrupt stereotypes that are out there about whoever the marginalized group is. So that's the first part of the structure, is disrupting some stereotypes. The second part is to consider the contexts in which people get marginalized. So what is the surrounding, like what's happening in the place where people are getting marginalized? So investigating that a little bit. And the third part is envisioning how things could be different. If we're going to move toward social action, we have to envision what that could be. So really thinking with kids, how could things be different? Once we've acknowledged stereotypes and then considered those contexts, envisioning and then creating an action plan. And that could be very little or big things in thinking about how can we impact this issue. And we use children's literature because as a starting point, because examining these things, because some of these issues are hard issues for kids and adults too. So doing it in children's literature is a very safe place to do it. And then the idea is that this would transfer into, so what about in our own community? What issues exist? How are we maybe marginalizing people with disabilities in our own contexts, and what action might we want to take? After we fully explore that in the context of children's literature, actually then bringing that whole framework into our own context or community to really move towards social action in our own space.
And do some people then have projects that would relate to moving it to action?
Yeah, that's our hope. I share this with my undergrad class. I haven't actually put it to use yet in an elementary school class, although that's what I hope that this article will do, is to encourage teachers to use this model in their classrooms to create more equitable contexts in which to teach.
And you provide two great sample texts, Mockingbird and his Sahara Special. You said you used this with your undergraduate majors. What were their reactions to the four-part structure? And I assume they read the books too. And how were they thinking about how they could use it in their teaching in the future?
Right. We read the books in the context of doing this. So we read the books in literature circle type situations. So they read the books and we talked about the structure, and they were really excited about thinking about this for their future classrooms, because they really picked up on, at first, they were a little bit reluctant in terms of the issues that they dealt with, and actually bringing that up and having conversations about it, because those have sometimes been the things that we kind of keep under the rug, I guess you could say, in classrooms, to not get into too much controversy. But in social action, in that kind of context, we have to bring the issues up. And so some students seemed a little uncomfortable talking about these things out in the open, but doing it through the literature made it easier for them. We didn't take it to the step of actually creating a plan and going out into our communities and doing something. But again, I hope that's something they will take on when they move out into the field of education.
And based on your students' initial reaction to this, will you repeat this in your future sections and future semesters?
Absolutely. I moved this semester out into a PBS, so I'm now actually teaching one of my classes out in a school. So I'm hoping to make this a new research project where we do something together with the undergraduates and the elementary school students and the classroom teachers as well.
Have you been building a library of sources that would be, as you were saying, better examples of individuals with disabilities who are main characters?
I have been, yes. I got a great resource list from Lintner. The thing is, when you search for disabilities literature, you get all the different kinds of books. You get the books that are just about the disability, and you really have to sort through to find the books that have really strong characters that have disabilities. And so I'm plugging along, reading lots of new books and figuring out the ones that would really work with them.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for talking with me about this. I hope others get this great idea about how to move beyond discussion to social action.
Thank you.
It's part of realizing the democratic ideal.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
The full citation for today's article is MacPhee and Lintner, 2012, From Social Studies to Social Action for a Disability-Inclusive World, published in Social Studies Research and Practice, Volume 7, Number 2, pages 1 to 19. The citation can also be found at the website coe.ilstu.edu/research/podcasts. Join us for future research breaks.
This podcast is sponsored by Illinois State University's College of Education, where we strive to assure that all students realize the democratic ideal through our teaching, research, and service to the field of education.